A young girl named Ellie, living on the harsh streets, spots an elderly woman, whom she later learns is named Agnes, fallen in a dark, chilly alley. With her heart racing and curiosity taking over, Ellie approaches, but what she discovers as she gets closer leaves her completely paralyzed. What happened to Agnes goes far beyond what she could have imagined. The rain fell relentlessly that night, turning the city streets into turbulent rivers. Ellie, a 13-year-old street girl, huddled in the corner of an alley, trying to protect herself from the cold that cut through her skin like blades. Her tattered and dirty clothes offered little resistance to the storm, and she trembled, feeling her bones ache with each gust of wind. Her eyes scanned the shadows, always alert, but something that night made her stop. At the other end of the alley, she saw a motionless figure, a hunched old woman sitting on the ground, her back against the wall. Ellie watched the woman for a few moments, intrigued. The figure seemed as fragile as she was, wrapped in rags that barely served as clothing. The old woman appeared completely oblivious to the world around her, her head bowed and arms crossed over her chest as if she were waiting for death. Ellie had seen many people on the streets, but something about this woman made her hesitate. Perhaps it was the way she seemed so abandoned, so defeated, as if she had given up the fight. Without thinking twice, Ellie stood up and walked over to her, ignoring the rain that soaked her body. "Hey, old lady, are you okay?" she asked, her voice hoarse and low, trying to catch Agnes's attention. The woman did not respond. Ellie looked around. There was no one in sight, and the alley felt like an isolated island in the middle of the city. Ellie pulled a torn blanket from her backpack and carefully draped it over Agnes's shoulders. "This will help you warm up," she said, even without knowing if the old woman was listening. When her fingers touched Agnes's shoulder, she felt the old woman's body tremble as if coming back to life after a long time in a state of apathy. The old woman slowly lifted her head, her tired eyes meeting Ellie's. "Why did you do that?" she murmured in a weak voice, almost a whisper. Ellie, surprised by the response, shrugged. "I don't know, you seem to need it more than I do," she replied, trying to hide her own vulnerability. Silence settled between them again, cut only by the sound of the rain. Ellie sat down next to the old woman, pulling her knees to her chest. The girl knew what it was like to be invisible, what it was like to be ignored by the world. Perhaps, in some way, she saw in Agnes a reflection of herself. "What's your name, old lady?" she asked, trying to start a conversation, something that could break the overwhelming silence. The elderly woman took a while to respond, as if she were struggling to remember who she was. "I'm Agnes," she finally said, her voice still weak. "My name is Agnes." Ellie nodded. "I'm Ellie," she said, offering a shy smile. "You shouldn't be out here," Agnes remarked with a lost look. "You're just a girl." Ellie let out a humorous laugh. "Yeah, I know, but these streets are all I have." The revelation hung in the air between them, and Agnes looked at her with a mix of pity and understanding. "I once had everything, but I lost it," the old woman murmured, her eyes filling with a deep sadness that seemed to tell years of suffering. Ellie remained silent, not knowing what to say. She was not good at comforting people, but something about Agnes made her want to stay nearby. Perhaps it was the loneliness they both shared, a loneliness that couldn't be explained in words. The wind blew harder and Agnes's body began to visibly tremble. "You have a fever," Ellie noted, feeling desperation grow in her chest. She looked around, trying to think of something she could do to help. "I'll figure something out, wait here," she said, quickly getting up. Agnes tried to protest but didn't have the strength to even stand. Ellie ran through the dark streets, the sound of the rain muffling her steps as she dashed. Her heart raced, and the image of Agnes, so fragile and vulnerable, wouldn't leave her mind. She ran to a small pharmacy almost hidden around a corner. Using the few coins she had, she bought some fever pills and a bottle of water. Back in the alley, Ellie found Agnes just as she had left her, hunched over, struggling to keep her eyes open. "Here, you need to get better," Ellie said, placing the pills in the old woman's hand and helping her drink the water. Agnes, still weak, swallowed the medicine with difficulty but thanked her with a slight nod. Ellie sat down next to her again, watching the rain slowly decrease. "I'll take care of you, okay? We'll manage together," she said with a determination that even she didn't know she possessed. Agnes opened a small smile, the first one Ellie had seen on her face. "Thank you," the elderly woman murmured, slowly closing her eyes, allowing herself to relax under the watchful eye of the girl. The rain finally stopped, but the humidity in the air still weighed heavily. Ellie and Agnes remained in the alley, wrapped in a quietness that felt almost comfortable now. The girl was attentive to the old woman, watching every movement of hers, worried about the fever that made her sweat even in the cold of dawn. The old woman had fallen asleep, but her sleep was restless, marked by groans and murmurs of confused dreams. Ellie curled up beside her, trying to warm herself with the torn blanket that covered them. She was used to taking care of herself, but taking care of another person was something new, something she hadn't expected to face. Even so, she felt a strange connection with Agnes, something that went beyond empathy. Perhaps it was the feeling that no matter how different they were, both were broken by life. The silence of the night was interrupted when Agnes began to murmur. Ellie at first couldn't understand what the old woman was saying, but then suddenly, a clear sentence escaped her lips. They left me alone." The old woman's voice was low but filled with anguish. Ellie frowned and leaned in closer, curious and concerned. "Who left you, old lady?" she asked, hoping for an answer but not very sure she would get one. Agnes slowly opened her eyes, as if she were struggling against a fog that enveloped her. She looked at Ellie, her tearful eyes reflecting a sadness that seemed unbearable. "My family," she whispered, her voice hoarse and trembling. "I had a family, but they are gone. I lost everything, I lost them." The air around them seemed to weigh even more, and Ellie felt a knot tighten in her throat. "How did that happen?" Ellie asked, not wanting to press but genuinely interested in the story that was beginning to unfold. Agnes took a deep breath, as if she needed all her strength just to relive those memories. "I was a businesswoman, I had everything a woman could want, a house, money, a wonderful husband and children." She paused, her gaze distant, lost in the past. "But I made wrong choices, business debts, everything crumbled, and over time, they left." Ellie remained silent, listening to every word. She knew what it was like to be left behind, she knew what it was like to lose everything. But hearing that from the mouth of someone so much older and more experienced made the weight of Agnes's story feel even heavier. She imagined what it must be like for the old woman to carry the burden of having lost her family and her entire life. "I was also abandoned, you know," Ellie revealed, lowering her head. It wasn't something she usually shared. "My parents left me when I was 10. One day they left home and never came back. I was left alone, learned to survive on the streets." She didn't look directly at Agnes but felt the old woman's gaze on her. "I think we have that in common," she concluded with a disguised bitterness. Agnes, without saying anything, placed her trembling hand on Ellie's shoulder. The simple gesture was enough to convey what words could not express. They were two survivors, two castaways in a sea of solitude, now united by their stories of loss. Time passed slowly as the two reconnected with their own wounds. Agnes tried to get up, but her body was still weak. "Stay lying down, you're not well yet," Ellie said, concerned. "Tomorrow we'll look for a better place, you'll see." Agnes nodded, but her gaze wandered through the dark alley, and she let out a slight sigh. "Thank you, kid. I don't know why you're helping me, but I appreciate it." Ellie just shrugged, pretending indifference that didn't match what she truly felt. "You seem to need it more than I do," she repeated the phrase she had said before, trying to hide the restlessness bubbling in her chest. Agnes chuckled softly, a fragile but sincere laugh. "I think this is the first time I've laughed in years," the old woman admitted, letting a solitary tear slip that she quickly wiped away with the back of her hand. Ellie smiled back, feeling a strange sense of comfort, realizing that no matter how difficult life was on the streets, at that moment, they had each other. The girl might not know what the future held, but she was sure of one thing: she wouldn't leave Agnes alone. At that moment, a sound of footsteps echoed through the alley. Ellie, always alert, quickly got up, positioning herself in front of Agnes like a shield. Her eyes swept the darkness until a figure emerged from the shadows, approaching slowly. It was a man dressed in worn clothes, apparently also homeless, but with a hard and suspicious expression. "Hey, kid," the man said in a deep voice, "is this old woman your problem now?" Ellie looked at him, keeping calm but feeling her heart race. "Yes, is there a problem with that?" The man gave a crooked smile, his eyes fixed on Agnes, who was lying down, vulnerable. "You'd better be careful. The weak don't last long around here," he warned before turning his back and disappearing into the shadows. Ellie stood there for a few moments, her heart pounding, before sitting back down beside Agnes. "It's going to be okay, old lady," Ellie whispered, adjusting the blanket over Agnes, who seemed to fall asleep again. Even so, the girl couldn't sleep. Something in her mind told her that this was just the beginning of a long journey. Morning arrived timidly with the first rays of sunlight filtering through the cracks between the buildings, slowly warming the damp and cold alley. Ellie had barely slept. She spent the entire night on high alert, watching the surroundings and monitoring Agnes, who was now breathing more heavily. The fever seemed to have worsened, and the old woman was sweating uncontrollably. Her pale face and dry lips made Ellie feel a knot forming in her throat. She needed to do something, and quickly. "Hold on, old lady, you're going to be okay," Ellie murmured, more to calm herself than to comfort Agnes. But inside, the girl knew that if she didn't act soon, it might be too late. Ellie got up, zipping up the tattered jacket she wore and looking around. She couldn't just stand there waiting for something worse to happen. She knew that on the streets, there was no time for hesitation, it was survive or perish. With one last look at Agnes, who was unconscious and sweating cold, Ellie ran through the streets of the city. The day was just beginning, and the city was waking up slowly. Ellie was running hurriedly, her small, agile legs taking her quickly along the busy sidewalks. She knew exactly where she needed to go, a pharmacy that was a few blocks away. Ellie had passed by there several times, always observing people coming in and out with bags full of medicines and products that she couldn't even dream of needing. As soon as she arrived at the pharmacy, she paused for a moment to catch her breath. She felt her heart pounding in her chest, but she couldn't waste time. With the few coins she had in her pocket, she entered the pharmacy, doing her best not to look out of place. The place was small but well organized, the shelves full of medicines, vitamins, and first aid items. Ellie looked around, searching for something that could help Agnes, but felt a tightness in her chest as she realized she didn't know what to buy. Everything seemed expensive, out of reach. She approached the counter where a middle-aged clerk was watching her with a suspicious expression. Ellie, trying to appear more confident than she really was, stepped closer. "I need something for a fever," the girl said, pulling out the few coins from her pocket and placing them on the counter. The clerk looked at the money and then at Ellie, frowning. "Is that all you have?" Ellie nodded. "It's for a friend, she's very sick." The man looked at the money again and, for a moment, seemed to consider not selling anything to the girl. But after a brief silence, he picked up a bottle of generic pills and a small bottle of water and placed them on the counter. "This is enough. Take this to your friend." Ellie felt a wave of relief as she picked up the items. "Thank you," she said quickly, leaving the pharmacy and running back to the alley. Upon arriving, she found Agnes exactly where she had left her, but the old woman looked even weaker, her breathing was labored, and she seemed to be trapped in a restless sleep. "Old lady, wake up," Ellie said, gently shaking her. Agnes slowly opened her eyes, blinking against the light that now illuminated the alley. "Ellie, what?" Agnes murmured, her voice weak. "Shoo, calm down. I brought you medicine," the girl said, opening the bottle of pills and placing one in Agnes's palm. "Take this, it will help you feel better." Agnes tried to lift her hand, but her movements were slow and uncoordinated. Without a second thought, Ellie held the old woman's hand and helped her bring the pill to her mouth, then she opened the bottle of water and offered her a few sips. Agnes drank with difficulty but managed to swallow the medicine. "Thank you, girl," she said, her voice almost imperceptible. Ellie watched the elderly woman with a mix of relief and concern. She knew this was only a temporary solution, but at least Agnes seemed a bit more aware now. The girl sat beside her, watching the activity in the street from a distance. Although the situation was desperate, Ellie felt she was doing the right thing. For a long time, they sat there in silence until Agnes finally spoke again. "You didn't have to do this for me," she said, her voice still weak but with a tone of gratitude that didn't go unnoticed. "I'm just an old woman. I've seen a lot in this life. There's no reason to worry about me." Ellie shook her head firmly. "You're wrong, old lady. We can't leave people behind, you know. I've been alone too, and I know what it's like." She paused, looking at the dirty hands that held the bottle of water. "I'm not going to leave you alone." Agnes closed her eyes for a moment, absorbing Ellie's words. "I owe you a great debt, girl," she murmured, opening her eyes and looking up at the sky. "I don't know how to repay you for this." "You don't owe me anything," Ellie replied simply. "We just take care of each other, right?" From that moment on, Ellie realized her life had changed. She couldn't explain how or why, but she felt that taking care of Agnes was something she needed to do, not out of obligation but from a kind of invisible necessity. Even though her own circumstances were miserable, she had found something greater than survival, an unlikely friendship built amid the chaos of the streets. The morning sun warmed the streets lightly, but for Ellie and Agnes, the cold of the previous night still seemed to cling to their bodies. Agnes was breathing more regularly now, which relieved Ellie, but the girl knew the struggle was far from over. Sitting in the same alley now illuminated by daylight, the two shared a more comfortable silence. Ellie looked at Agnes, curious about the old woman's past. There was something in her eyes, an invisible weight that seemed much larger than just abandonment. "You used to be someone important, right?" Ellie ventured, breaking the silence with her soft voice. Agnes, who had been absently watching the activity in the street, turned her gaze to the girl. For a moment, she seemed lost in thought, as if Ellie's words had pulled her back to a reality she no longer wanted to face. "Important," Agnes repeated, letting out a short, bitter laugh. "I wouldn't say that, girl. I was someone, yes, someone who believed the world could be conquered with her hands." Ellie fell silent, sensing Agnes was about to share something deeper. She knew the value of listening, of letting people speak when they were ready, and Agnes seemed finally willing to share a bit of her story. "I had a company, you know," the old woman began, her eyes fixed on the horizon as if she were reliving moments from her life. "I worked in export, big business, important contracts, many employees. At that time, I thought success was defined by what one possessed. The more I achieved, the more I wanted. It was never enough." Ellie listened attentively, absorbing every word. "And what happened?" She leaned in slightly closer to Agnes, as if the simple gesture could help her understand the depth of this woman's fall. Agnes sighed, her shoulders hunched as if they carried the weight of a lifetime of regrets. "Greed, that was my mistake. I made deals I shouldn't have, deals that harmed many people, including my family." Her voice trembled, and she rubbed her face with trembling hands, trying to push away the painful memories. "My husband, Martin, he always warned me. He always told me to take better care of our family, not to let money be the only thing that mattered, but I didn't listen. I kept drowning myself in work, in dangerous deals. When everything collapsed, he left, took our children, and I was left alone." Silence fell between them again. Ellie looked at Agnes, and for the first time, she saw not just a woman broken by time but someone who had destroyed herself inside long before hitting the streets. She knew abandonment, but hearing how Agnes had lost everything due to her own decisions made the girl reflect. "He left you?" Ellie asked hesitantly, wanting to understand the depth of that wound better. "Yes," Agnes replied, her voice barely a whisper. "He left, and with good reason. I destroyed his life. After the company went bankrupt, the debt swallowed us. The last time I saw him, he was walking out the door with our 2 small children, and he didn't look back." Ellie felt a tightness in her chest. She couldn't imagine what it would be like to lose everything like that, especially a family. "And you never tried to find them again?" Agnes shook her head slowly. "I tried at first, but then time passed, shame consumed me. I withdrew, let the emptiness take over. I had nothing left to offer, not to them, not to myself." Ellie remained silent for a few minutes, digesting Agnes's story. She understood a little about how cruel the world could be and how people could lose everything. But in a way, she also identified with that struggle. The difference was that Ellie had not yet given up, she was still fighting every day to survive. Maybe that's what connected her to Agnes. They were both survivors but at different stages of their battles. "You can try again, you know," Ellie said, breaking the silence with a gentle, almost shy voice. "You're still alive, you still have a chance to do something with that." Agnes looked at her, surprised by the simplicity of the girl's statement. "Try again." "Girl, I'm a broken old woman, homeless, without a family. What could I do?" Ellie shrugged. "You helped me, right? That's something." She offered a small smile, trying to ease the tension. Maybe you still have something to offer the world. It doesn't have to be big, you can start small. But as long as you're here, there's still time. Agnes fell silent, pondering the girl's words. There was truth there, no matter how painful it was. She had wallowed in guilt and shame for so long that she had forgotten she was still alive, that she could still try in some way to fix what was left of her life. I don't know if I have the strength for that, Agnes admitted, her voice weak. But thank you for believing in me, Ellie. The girl smiled again, this time more confidently. Then let's start somewhere. We can find a way to make some money. I don't know, you have experience with business, and I know the streets. We'll figure it out, old lady. Agnes let out a soft laugh, the first genuinely cheerful sound Ellie had heard from the elderly woman since she met her. You have a strong spirit, girl. Maybe I really have something to learn from you. Maybe, Ellie replied, a spark in her eyes. But first of all, we need a plan, and we also need to find a safer place to stay. We can't survive here for long. Agnes nodded slowly, feeling a small spark of hope begin to ignite within her. As weak as her body was and as tired as her mind felt, there was something about Ellie that inspired her, something she couldn't ignore. Maybe that girl, with her simplicity and determination, was the key for Agnes to find a new reason to keep fighting. Then let's find that place, Agnes said with a renewed strength in her voice, and who knows, maybe start over. Ellie looked at her with a slight smile, and for the first time, she felt that maybe, just maybe, she was right. But also pride. It was a good start, Ellie. But we still have a long way to go. Ellie nodded, aware that while this was a big step, there was still much to be done. They needed to keep working hard, find new ways to expand the small business, and more importantly, avoid the problems that came with the men who extorted them. If we keep this up, maybe we can get out of this situation, Ellie said hopefully. Agnes agreed. Yes, kid. And we will get out, but always with caution. We can't forget the challenges that surround us. Life on the streets is relentless, and it won't get easier. But as long as we have each other, we can go further. That night, Ellie and Agnes returned to the shelter with more hope in their hearts and the feeling that, despite the difficulties, they were on the right path. Days passed, and Ellie and Agnes's business began to thrive. Shoe cleaning, although simple, brought in more customers than they had imagined. Ellie, always dedicated, honed her technique, and in no time, her skill caught the attention of even the more discerning individuals. Agnes, for her part, used all her experience to attract new customers and ensure they returned. The coins accumulated daily began to turn into a small reserve, something Ellie had never had in her entire life on the streets. Now, it was not just about surviving. For the first time, Ellie felt that they were really building something. They still faced daily challenges like the presence of the men who controlled the square and charged their unfair fees, but over time, the success they began to achieve gave them a newfound confidence. More than that, a new idea started to emerge in Ellie's mind: they could do more, much more. On a sunny afternoon, after a particularly productive day of work, Ellie and Agnes sat on their usual bench in the square, watching the movement around them. Ellie, still excited about the progress, looked at Agnes with a confident smile. I was thinking, what do you think about us expanding? Not just cleaning shoes but also offering simple repairs. I learned a bit from a guy who repaired shoes on the street. I can try to do the same. Agnes smiled, impressed with the girl's vision. You're full of ideas, Ellie, and that's great. But let's take it slow. Expanding means more responsibility, and we need to make sure we can sustain what we already have before taking the next step. Ellie nodded, understanding Agnes's caution, but she didn't let go of her excitement. I know, old lady, but we're achieving more than I thought we could. If we keep this up, maybe we can even rent a small space, a place where people can come and leave their shoes for repairs and cleaning. Agnes pondered for a moment, observing the spark in Ellie's eyes. She recognized that youthful enthusiasm, that hope that Agnes herself had lost over the years. But Ellie was helping her rediscover it. The idea of starting over had become more real every day, and now she saw the possibility of not just surviving but truly living. Maybe you're right, Ellie, Agnes said, breaking the silence with a smile. Maybe it's time to think bigger. Ellie's face lit up. Really? Can we try? Agnes nodded, but soon her expression became more serious. But we need to do this right. We need a plan, and more importantly, we need to ensure that those men who charge us won't continue to exploit us. If we want to grow, we have to find a way to get rid of them. Ellie bit her lip, thinking about what Agnes had said. She knew that even with all the success they were having, the threat of the extortionists still loomed over their heads like a shadow. How are we going to do this? They always come back to collect, and we can't fight against them. Agnes smiled enigmatically. Maybe it's not a matter of fighting directly but of finding a way to make them irrelevant. If we can establish a strong base, we can negotiate with others, gain the trust of the community, maybe even count on the support of other vendors. If we have a support network, those men will lose control. Ellie was silent for a moment, considering Agnes's plan. So we need to win over more people, right? Make them see us as an important part of the square. Exactly, Agnes said with a determined look. We will need allies, people who see us as a positive force here, not just as vendors. If we are useful to them, if we gain everyone's trust, those extortionists will think twice before messing with us. With the plan in mind, Ellie and Agnes began to work even harder, but now with a new focus. It was not enough just to make money, they needed to earn the trust of the people around them. With each customer who stopped to clean their shoes, Agnes made sure to engage in conversation, to create bonds, to understand their needs, and to show that she and Ellie were more than just street vendors. They began offering small services for free to those in need, helping other homeless people with the little they had. Little by little, the unlikely duo started to be seen as an essential part of that small community in the square. Other vendors, who at first looked on with suspicion, began to talk to Agnes and Ellie, exchanging ideas and supporting each other. Some even started seeking Agnes's help to negotiate with difficult customers, taking advantage of her natural ability to deal with people. Ellie, for her part, did what she could to help those around her, always with a smile and a word of encouragement. Weeks passed, and the square no longer seemed as threatening as before. Agnes and Ellie, now more established, felt they were building a solid support network. But they knew the real test would come when the extortionists returned, and they did. On a cloudy afternoon, as Ellie and Agnes were finishing up with a customer, the three men who used to extort them appeared again. This time, however, they were not alone. Other square residents, customers, and vendors watched from a distance, curious to see what would happen. There was something different in the air, a tension mixed with expectation. The man with the scar smirked, saying, well, what do we have here? It looks like you've been doing quite well. I think it's time to increase our cut. Ellie felt her stomach churn, but before she could say anything, Agnes stepped forward. "We're not paying anymore." The scarred man frowned, surprised by Agnes's response. "What did you say?" "You heard me," Agnes continued, her voice firm and calm. "We're here working honestly. People know us, respect us. You can't keep extorting us." The man took a step toward Agnes, but something unexpected happened. One of the other vendors, a man whom Agnes had recently helped, stood up and walked over to them. "He's right. You can't do this here anymore." Soon, another vendor joined in, then more customers nearby began to surround Ellie and Agnes. The small community they had built over the weeks was now showing up. "If you want to charge anything, you'll have to go through all of us," said one of the vendors. The scarred man looked around, surprised by the number of people now staring at them defiantly. He knew that, despite his strength, he couldn't take them all on. "This isn't over," he said, gritting his teeth before stepping back with his accomplices. Feeling her heart race, Ellie looked at Agnes, who smiled serenely. "I told you we needed allies," murmured the old woman, satisfied with the outcome. With the exit of the extortionists and their victory over the looming threat, Ellie and Agnes finally felt they had achieved more than just survival. They had built a small support network, a circle of trust that allowed them to breathe a little easier. But despite the victory, both knew that the journey was far from over. Life on the streets always had new challenges lurking, and now, more than ever, they needed to be prepared for what came next. The morning after the confrontation, the square had a different atmosphere. There was a sense of relief among the vendors, and Ellie and Agnes became even more respected figures. People greeted them with smiles and words of thanks. Ellie, although pleased with what they had achieved, was already thinking about the next steps. "Old lady," she said while organizing the work materials, "I think it's time for us to take the next step. We can't just stay here cleaning shoes. We can do more." Agnes, sitting beside her, watched the girl with a paternal look. Over the past few months, Ellie had grown before her eyes. From a lost street child, she had become a determined young woman, full of ideas and plans. Agnes knew that Ellie had a bright future ahead, and she wanted to help her reach it. "You're right, Ellie," Agnes said, nodding. "We've proven we can earn respect and trust. Now we need to expand on that, find ways to grow." Ellie smiled, excited. "I was thinking. What if we got a fixed place? A small space, maybe a rented room, where people can drop off their shoes for repairs and we can work without relying on the streets." Agnes pondered for a moment. The idea of having a fixed location was tempting, but she knew it would require careful planning. "It's a good idea, Ellie, but we need to make sure we're ready. A fixed place means more responsibility, more costs. We need to have a solid foundation before taking that step." "I know," Ellie replied, a bit more serious. "But we have a network now. We have people who trust us, who keep coming back. If we start slowly, I think we can make it work." Agnes smiled with pride. "You have the spirit of an entrepreneur, kid. Let's move forward, but with caution. Let's look for the right place, ensure it's accessible, and that we can keep everything in order. And more importantly, let's continue taking care of the people around us. They are the ones who have helped us get this far, and they will continue to be our strength." Ellie nodded, understanding the importance of Agnes's words. It wasn't just about finding a space, it was about maintaining the respect and bonds they had built. They could not forget their roots or the people who had supported them along the way. In the following days, Ellie and Agnes began looking for a small space they could rent. They didn't have much money, but with the help of some contacts they had made, they soon found a simple place that met their needs, a small room at the back of a local grocery store. The owner, an elderly gentleman who knew Agnes's story, offered them an affordable rent, believing in the duo's potential. "You have something special," the man said while showing them the space. "I've seen many people trying to start over, but you have something different. I think you'll go far." Ellie looked at Agnes, both smiling, knowing this was the opportunity they needed. It was simple, small, but it was the beginning of something much bigger. With the space rented, they started working immediately. Ellie and Agnes cleaned and organized the area, transforming the small room into a little shoe repair shop. It wasn't luxurious, but it was cozy and functional. They put up a simple sign at the entrance, "Repairs and Cleanings, Ellie and Agnes," with letters hand-painted by one of the friends they had made in the square. On the first day of operation, Ellie felt a mix of anxiety and excitement. "Will people come?" she asked while arranging the tools. Agnes, with her characteristic calmness, replied with a smile, "They will come, Ellie. We've built something solid. People trust us, and if we do our job well, not only will they come back, but they will recommend us to others." And Agnes was right. Soon, the first customers began to arrive, many of them former regulars from the square, curious to see the new place. They left their shoes for repair and cleaning, always praising the duo's work. The small space began to come alive with the sounds of conversations and the constant work of Ellie and Agnes. Days turned into weeks, and the little shoe repair business thrived. Ellie, with her energy and determination, won over more and more customers, while Agnes, with her wisdom and people skills, maintained a warm and respectable atmosphere. The workshop became a meeting point where people not only dropped off their shoes but also chatted, shared stories, and often sought advice. Ellie, becoming increasingly confident, began to dream big. "One day, old lady, we're going to have a network of workshops like this in various parts of the city." Agnes laughed, but she did not dismiss the girl's dream. "If anyone can do it, it's you, Ellie. But for now, let's take good care of this one." Time passed, and with it, Ellie and Agnes became well-known and beloved figures in the neighborhood. The workshop flourished, and so did the two of them. Agnes, who had hit rock bottom, now saw a new life blooming alongside Ellie, and Ellie, who once wandered the streets aimlessly, found not only a mentor but a mother figure in Agnes. One night, as they were closing the workshop, Ellie looked at Agnes and smiled. "We did it, old lady. Not just survive but truly live." Agnes looked at the girl with eyes full of pride and emotion. "Yes, we did it, Ellie. But our journey doesn't end here. There's always more to learn, more to grow. And as long as we're together, nothing can stop us." Ellie nodded, feeling the depth of Agnes's words. They had overcome poverty, fear, and threats. They had built something real, something that no one could take away from them. And now, together, they were ready to face any challenge that came their way. As they locked up the workshop and walked back home, the moon shone in the sky, illuminating the path ahead. It was a new beginning for both of them, a beginning of hope, of success, and above all, of a friendship that had become an unbreakable bond. Months passed, and the bond between Ellie and Agnes only grew stronger. Their shoe repair shop not only sustained them but became a beacon of hope and community in the neighborhood. They had transformed from two souls struggling on the streets to respected entrepreneurs who had made a real difference in the lives of many. The shop was more than just a place of business, it was a hub where stories were shared, where people came not only for repairs but for the sense of family and belonging that Ellie and Agnes had cultivated. They held small community events, teaching others how to fix and maintain their shoes, fostering a sense of self-reliance and skill among the local residents. One crisp evening, as they were setting up for a community workshop, Ellie turned to Agnes with a look that was both reflective and hopeful. "You know, old lady, we've come so far. But I think there's still more we can do for this place, for these people." Agnes nodded, her eyes reflecting the pride she felt for Ellie. "You're right. We've built something, but there's always room to grow, to give back more. What are you thinking?" Ellie's eyes lit up with an idea. "What if we start a program for kids like I was? Teaching them skills, giving them a place to learn, maybe even offering them a chance to work here part-time. It could help keep them off the streets." Agnes's expression softened with approval. "That's a wonderful idea, Ellie. It would give them a chance we didn't have when we were starting out. Let's plan it out." And so, they did. With the support of the community, they launched the Soul Project, a program where children from the neighborhood could learn shoe repair, basic business skills, and even life lessons about resilience and community. It wasn't long before the program attracted attention from local schools, charities, and even some city officials who saw the potential in what Ellie and Agnes were doing. The project grew, providing not just skills but scholarships for continuing education, mentorships, and a safe space where kids could dream of a future beyond survival. Ellie, who once had no place to call her own, was now a pivotal figure in shaping the lives of young ones. As the Soul Project gained momentum, Ellie and Agnes faced new challenges but also new opportunities. They expanded their shop, adding a small cafe corner where community members could gather for coffee or tea, further fostering the sense of community. The cafe became known for its pay-what-you-can policy, ensuring that everyone, regardless of their financial situation, could enjoy a moment of warmth and connection. One day, while sipping tea at their cafe, Richard, the former business partner of Agnes, walked in. His appearance had softened, he looked older but less burdened. He approached with a genuine smile. "Agnes, Ellie, I've been hearing about what you've built here. It's impressive." Agnes, who had once felt shame in front of him, now stood tall with pride. "Thank you, Richard. It's been quite the journey, but we're making a difference here." Richard nodded, his eyes scanning the room filled with locals chatting, laughing, and learning. "I see that. I'm here because I want to help. I have some resources, connections. I'd like to invest in your project, not just financially but with my time." Ellie looked at Agnes, who had been her rock and now her partner in this new chapter. "What do you think, old lady?" Agnes smiled, seeing the potential for even greater impact. "I think we could use a good partner. Someone who believes in what we're doing." Richard's involvement brought new energy to the Soul Project. With his help, they secured grants, expanded their educational programs, and even started a small scholarship fund for the most promising students to pursue higher education in business or crafts. Years went by, and Ellie, now in her 20s, had taken on a leadership role in their expanding enterprise. Agnes, aging gracefully, became a beloved figure in the community, often seen teaching the younger generation the art of shoe repair with her stories of life's ups and downs. The square where Ellie first found Agnes was no longer just a place of survival, it had transformed into a vibrant community hub, a testament to what can be achieved when compassion meets action. Their story spread beyond the neighborhood, inspiring others across the city to start similar initiatives, proving that even in the harshest conditions, hope, hard work, and community can lead to profound change. On a warm summer evening, as they sat together looking over the bustling square, Ellie reflected, "We did more than survive, didn't we?" Agnes, her eyes twinkling with the joy of a life rebuilt, replied, "We did, Ellie. We turned survival into living, and living into thriving. And now, we're helping others do the same." They watched as children laughed, couples strolled, and old friends met for coffee, all under the watchful eye of the shop that had changed so many lives. It was a legacy of resilience, of love, and of the unbreakable bond between a young girl and an old woman who, together, had forged a new path not just for themselves but for their entire community.